Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid after a day off. I'm Brigid Burke and I'm here on this is a Saturday, okay, so not sure how many people will join me again for a Saturday. Sometimes I'm surprised, like I think there's not going to be anybody and then there ends up being a bunch of people. We are about to move into, good morning Sam, I was just saying, I wasn't sure who was going to join me today. But yesterday I was off for a conference, which I think was something like the Imaginative Landscape. Good morning, Melissa. It was something like the Imaginative Landscape, the liminality of water. Okay, which of course anybody who follows all of my channels knows that this is a big thing. Kim, good morning. It's good to see you. For a minute, I thought, because I started to confuse your username with somebody else's for a minute. But I'm like, no, wait, I haven't seen you in a while. So today I'm here on this, I was off yesterday because I was at this conference, and the conference was virtual, it was by Zoom, so I was literally sitting right here. In fact, I have my big Papa Sun chair behind me that I dragged out of another room so I could sit and watch it comfortably. And it was really a very good conference in a lot of ways, although it really, for me, I felt like it really highlighted both the good and the not so good things about academia, because when you get a PhD, you kind of started down the road to a career like that. But for the same reasons that I don't want to corporatize my whole way of living is the same reason I don't want to be in academia. Because I saw there was some really brilliant graduate students who were presenting on different material. And they were really interesting topics, like talking about holy wells, for example, and the connection of, the way past and present and things can all kind of meld together in these spaces, and sort of connecting it to the atmosphere of ghost stories and things like that, which I think is just really cool. That was one of my favorite presentations. And then ones about things like hydromancy, how the ancients used water for divination and bringing in the gods. Now, of course, there's always going to be a very academic bent to the way that they're discussing it, but they were getting into certain texts and things that I'm very, very familiar with. And I thought, that's interesting. I didn't remember that bit. For example, the one of the first presentations was on hydromancy, and she was talking about how in the Greek magical papyri, they talk about how depending on who you're trying to contact, like you use different kinds of water. Like I think it's you use rainwater to contact the gods, and then if you're trying to contact ancestors, you're supposed to use spring water, and then if there's another type, you're supposed to use river water. It's like I don't remember all the categories off the top of my head, but I was like, wow, that's interesting that people would say that the type of water and the place where it comes from has something to do with the kind of result that you're going to get. Now, speaking of water and speaking of flow, it's really strange because I've woken up the last couple of days. I woke up this morning, I went to bed last night and I woke up this morning with this like profound heaviness, like right here. And it was like, it's not a physical thing in the sense of like, oh, I'm sick or don't feel well. It was more of a, like a sadness that was just sitting on me. And I'm like, that's really odd because I don't, obviously there's all things that we have every day that, could be, maybe we're not all entirely where we want to be, but I'm also not exactly in a bad place either. So, I was just like, okay, I don't know where that really heavy sadness is coming from. I mean, the first thought might be like, oh, it's something hormonal or it's something like that. But then I woke up this morning so of course I asked my guides about it this morning, and they're like, no, that's not your feelings, that's somebody else's. Somebody else is feeling very heavy and very sad, and that there's that connection there. And that may have been a couple days ago. I was talking about feeling that strong sense of void, and that seems to be connected to this as well. So I was like, oh, okay, there's somebody whose feelings I'm very strongly connecting in with. And if anybody who does any kind of divination work, or potentially anything where you might sit down and be connecting with the energy of other people, you may find that happens. It was something that didn't happen to me originally when I would start doing readings. Because when I read, I just read what the cards say. I'm not, obviously you do want to try to tune into people's energy, but a lot of times, even if you just read the cards straight up, you still get things that are very relevant to people. And some people are just able to take that mediumistic kind of step where people kind of be able to move more into people's energy and into spaces. And the more you open up your own vulnerability, and the more you open up your heart space to whatever happens, whether you judge it to be a good thing or a bad thing, the more that those kinds of impressions can come in. So for me, and I feel like, and being that nothing ever exists in isolation, I think when something like that happens, it can also, whatever that individual might be going through, that you're feeling in your body, still may also be part of things that, it may trigger things in you that you're working out for yourself. So everything kind of happens almost in this nexus, it's not, what is it? I don't want to quite say it's like the butterfly effect, because that's that whole chaos thing that, a butterfly lands here and then it causes this to happen here and happen here. And then like somehow there's this big change and then it becomes this big global event just, from this one little tiny thing that happens. So yeah, anything like that, it's like a web that's disturbed. Like it can set things in motion. And so yeah, sometimes things like that can be triggers for people. But when you're doing a lot of intuitive work, and I find that the more I do that and the more I get involved with channeling and stuff, and also when I used to work in a store and used to work more regularly with clients, and I just found that before somebody was coming in, they'd be like, oh, you have an appointment with person X, whoever they are. And if person X was anxious, drained, sick, something like that, I would find that before they came in, I would either have a headache or something, and I'm like, well, where did this come from? I was fine when I got here, But then when you talk to the person, you realize that's what they're feeling. Or if I suddenly get this sudden anxiety before they come in, and then you realize this person's, very, very frenetic about something and needs advice, and you're just kind of like, okay, because it's a type of an empathy that actually starts to come in, and starts to come in very, very strongly. So I'm finding that happens more and more. And obviously, before you read for somebody, I know other people who are readers will sometimes get that as well, who I've worked with. But when you go straight in, you just find sometimes that you're picking that up. And so then there becomes the thing of how do you separate your own feelings out from the feelings of somebody else, because that's where your meditation comes in. That's where the idea of being able to detach and pull back is the way in which you need to. This is where your rational mind actually can be helpful, because you can kind of pull back and say, okay, wait a minute. I need to recognize that I'm holding, you want to hold that space for the other person, especially if you're in a kind of therapeutic or healing kind of relationship with them. But this was interesting because it's been a couple mornings of this, so I feel like there's somebody I'm tuning into very, very regularly. I think I might know who it is. And of course, I don't want to talk about anybody's stuff on a live stream, but it's just, I think I kind of know who it is. But it's interesting because it really raised the question for me, because I think even people who don't engage regularly in so-called intuitive work, like the kind of things that I do, I think this can still happen to people. And because we're always projecting things all the time. Okay, when we talk to people, I think the common example that I would like to give is the idea of, if, let's just say you're in a workplace and you walk down the hall and you walk past somebody who is a coworker of yours. Let's just say it's somebody you talk to, pretty regularly, and they're friendly, and you have a friendly interaction. And let's just say you walk by and say good morning to that person, and that person just puts their head down and says nothing. Now your first immediate thought is going to be, oh my God, what did I do? Did I upset them? Did I offend them? While that's, again, depending on the circumstance and the context, right? I suppose something like that could happen, but really what ends up happening is, but then you start ruminating on going through all the things that, your interactions with them, and then you start to feel a defense come up, right? You immediately start to go, oh, well, I didn't do anything to them and they're just being a jerk. And so you immediately kind of respond in kind. It's like, it's like that reciprocal reaction. Another thing, this is something that I used to try, but I don't really do it so much anymore, just because in certain contexts, people can misunderstand it. But if you go into a public place, you go into a grocery store, you go someplace and you're walking around doing your thing, if you present yourself as kind of smiling, now sometimes people will look at you like you're weird, but a lot of times you will get, if you see somebody who's got like a really grumpy kind of a face, they'll light up. What you have to watch out for if you're female is that sometimes if you happen to pass a man and do that they might get the wrong impression. And it's just like, yeah, no. But it's, it's one of those things where, if you just even if you don't look at people directly and say anything to them or, whatever, you can, even if you just kind of have that pleasant kind of countenance, you will see that your response kind of ripples out into the people around you. I mean, not everybody. Some people are very, very in their own head and in their own stuff, but you will find that people will respond to that. Just as if you go in and you're in a ticked off kind of a mood and you're, that's also going to affect people. People may, because people do that automatically, because they're picking up on what your emotion is or what's coming off of your energy field. Like they're sensing something that is frenetic, and if people don't want to deal with that, they'll kind of pull away from it. But sometimes, a lot of times, what they say will happen. There's the idea of not taking the world personally, and part of the whole point of meditation and meditative practice, the idea of detachment. Even if we have to recognize the fact that in detaching from things, that you can never entirely detach. You know what I mean? You never can. Like, I think, what was it? Who's watching the watcher? You know what I mean? If you take a step back and you're watching your mind, well, then who's watching the watcher? Like, you could easily get yourself into that idea. It's kind of like if you, again, Alan Watts, he had talked about the idea if you look into a TV camera and then there's like all these cameras kind of pointing back and forth at each other, that you can almost get this infinite loop of kind of seeing yourself, and it has this kind of freaky, almost funhouse kind of effect. And that's also the way that we perceive people's emotions around us as well. So things can get distorted, and we can end up, even though, yes, we have to recognize our connection to people and the fact that we're around people. This is why also there's a lot of intuitives that I know. For example, there's a guy up in Hackettstown. I think he's around Hackettstown, Mansfield area, which is about 15 minutes from where I live. A guy who goes by the name Intuitive Jack. Now, I've not met Intuitive Jack. I know that he is a healer. He talks to people on the phone. He deals with people by phone. He doesn't, from what I understand, he doesn't go out a whole lot because he is so sensitive. He's so open that being around people is actually almost physically painful to him. You know what I mean? He wants to kind of keep that barrier up. And you will find that will happen sometimes with people. They need space kind of away from people because it's just too much information and stuff kind of coming in at the same time, at once. And if you are somebody, which is why you have to have strong boundaries at the same time you want to be vulnerable, which is it's a difficult mix. I mean, it's a possible mix, but it takes some work, it takes some practice to kind of get there, and it requires, first off, that you have kind of a solidity in who you are. And of course, if you're not at a stage where you feel that, or maybe if things have changed recently and you're in a new space, you may be feeling extra vulnerable. So it's good to be mindful of that. And I think the first thing people need to think about is, first of all, don't beat yourself up over that. Don't be just like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way, or I shouldn't, I need to buck up and not feel that. It's not. It ends up turns around and ends up becoming a self-critical thing. So now, when you start criticizing yourself, I'm not the first person to say this, but I have said it on this live stream before. Is the idea that when you feel depressed, a lot of times that's that anger, but you're turning it back in on yourself. So you are just, because you feel like, and it can be a lot of different emotions. I mean, it can be anger, it can be futility, it can be a sense of helplessness, a loss of control, whatever it is that you're feeling. You may turn it into a negative, and you may turn it back on yourself that somehow this is a failure of you. But it's not. It's something that goes in, and we have to be mindful of how the external environment helps us, or how it affects us. Sorry, that's really more the word I'm looking for. How it affects us. How are we affected by this? And and in the mix of that too, it's like, what are other people feeling that we're picking up on, and what is that triggering in our either current situation, or what kind of past memory or something is it evoking? It made me think this morning as I was thinking about this. There's a deck that I love that I don't use that much publicly, particularly on YouTube, because for some reason YouTube has this thing about if you show a tarot card that has any like nudie figures or anything like that on it, they might not show your video. They might say, oh, well, your video contains pornography or something, which is ridiculous. If you look at a traditional Rider-Waite-Smith deck, you have certain cards like the World and the Lovers, and even the Devil card, like different ones where you will have figures who are nude. And of course they're drawings. They're not, it's not photographs of people. But people have had their channels blocked on YouTube for having those. So you'll see a lot of readers will either put tape over those things, or they will, if they put it down, like they'll put like a crystal on top of it or something to not show it. And I just don't like that, because to me then it limits the kind of decks that I can use. When I do my readings, I hold the cards up and I'm kind of at an angle, so sometimes I have to like put another card over it, or try to kind of like put my hand over it so people don't see. But anyway, this is one of those decks that I love. It's called the Tarot Oscuro by Estelle, I think you say it Rivera. I don't know if it's, I think it's just Estelle Rivera. I follow her. She's a really, really kind of really interesting artist. She's really very creative and does stuff but she does stuff that's kind of on the edge of almost goth and kink and stuff like this. And again, it may or may not be everybody's cup of tea. But this deck, I would love to use this deck more, but there's so much. There's a lot of like, a lot of that kind of stuff in these decks. So it makes it very hard from that perspective to be able to use them on camera. But I do use this deck a lot privately. And the card that came to my mind from this deck was her version of the Eight of Cups. Now, if you're familiar with the Eight of Cups card, the Eight of Cups is about when something, you usually, in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, you'll see stacked up almost like, not quite like a pyramid, but just there's a stacking of 8 cups. And there's a person carrying, a staff, walking away from the cups towards like a mountain path. And there is an eclipse in the sky. Okay, you'll see this moon with like this smiling, actually this kind of very, stern kind of moon face. But what it is the moon blocking out the sun. It's not evident. Some decks actually really emphasize the eclipse aspect, or some take it out entirely. But it is there, and I feel like that is important, because eclipses have to do with sudden change. And so the eclipse imagery on the card is representing somebody making a sudden change and taking a new path away from something that perhaps gave them abundance in the past. And Estelle's version of the Eight of Cups is this, okay? And this is what it makes me think of. You have this woman who is, you see the 8 cups here, and it's like you see almost these, they're sort of like hands, they're almost like woody hands, like they're like tree branches. And this woman is trying to reach for the sky here, but she's being pulled back down. And yes, she does have multiple arms and legs, but the figures are all very kind of, fantastical on this deck. So she's trying to get away, but there's things that are trying to pull her back down to where she was. And so that to me is the energy of what I'm talking about today. When you are so, the ways in which, we want to move ahead, but we end up being weighted down because when you open yourself up to being vulnerable, then all of a sudden it's like now you're almost feeling the weight of everybody's stuff around you. And I think even if you're not really involved in intuitive work, I think this can be true, especially if you're just a naturally very sensitive person. And the answer to that, again, is not to build a wall. The answer is to say, okay, how do you integrate that vulnerability? And it does take some time to do it. But like I said, I always kind of go back to meditation being the central thing. And again, and meditation where you're able to really do something that allows you to hear your inner voice. And again, that takes time too. That's something you don't want to get frustrated with. Because when you first start to meditate, it's going to be very hard. You're going to be bored and restless, and your mind's going to go here, and it's going to go there, and then you're going to say, oh, see, I don't know, I can't meditate. My mind's too busy. I don't know how to meditate. Well, don't give yourself, people will give themselves crazy goals. They'll be like, oh, well, I'm going to meditate for, I'm going to meditate for an hour. I wouldn't meditate for an hour. Just start with like maybe 2 minutes, then like go to 5 minutes. I've said this before, but, and it seems like a nothing exercise, but believe it, if you do something like that every single day, if you have a grounding practice and if you just meditate, and again, if you're a very busy person, then you don't need to take hours out of your day. When I do my integrated Amrita meditation, I will do that. That takes about 35 minutes. So I usually plan that. I might do it first thing when I get up before I do anything else, because you're not supposed to eat or drink before, like an hour before, I think it is. If you have a big meal, then you got to wait like 3 hours because you don't want it to affect your energy level. And then I do it after. And then you wait 10 minutes after before you eat, drink, or talk. So it's one of those. That's a more intense meditation. I haven't done it this morning, actually. I'm probably going to do it later this morning before I have a friend who's visiting today, to do a late celebration of her birthday. So I'm going to, so I'll probably do it before she comes over. But whenever, but whatever it is to kind of allow yourself to kind of find that center space. And this is one of the reasons why it's important, because otherwise we may go through life or try to work through change in such a way that we're not really hearing, what we're hearing is everybody else's stuff. Now, social pressure is already one thing, okay? When we decide we want to take a different path and society says to us, oh no, you shouldn't take that path. You should do X, Y, and Z, right? This is what you should do. You don't want to, so that's enough of a pressure. It could be pressure like, comments from family or maybe even comments from friends. And a lot of times maybe these are people who are well-meaning or concerned about your welfare. But if you're just trying to do something different, you're just trying to go, people always want you, your family in particular may always want you to take the blazed trail, right? Because that's the safest one. But then you're also, we deal with things like social approval and stuff like that, and all of those other factors that can come in that, again, if you're not firm in your own identity, that can be a factor as well. And so sometimes that's the first thing you have to do is get clear on who you are and where you are, and so that's a whole different process. But again, sometimes it just takes time. I mean, usually it's not before you're in your 30s that you start to have that sense of yourself, and maybe not even until your 40s. So, because that's the point at which people will stop what they're doing and go, "What am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? I want to do something different," So, yeah, it's very hard to. So you already got those complications, and then if you're empathetic enough to be able to pick up on the emotions of other people, then that's something else you want to separate out. But again, what a lot of people will do is they will just shut themselves off and say, well, I'm just going to live in my little bubble and I'm going to stay away from people. But then you're going to find that you're going to be feeling the effects of isolation. So there's really, we can all take a time out. We can all refocus ourselves. I mean, a lot of people may focus very heavily on their work and stuff, but those things that are out of balance are going to eventually come back around and bother you again in some fashion. So it's good to acknowledge that they're there. And if you are feeling something, it's good to stop and say, why am I feeling this? I mean, is there a reason for me feeling this? Or am I picking up on something in the environment? We have, if you have somebody around you who is, I don't know, you ever have people in your sphere who, when you come in and no matter what you say to them, like everything's negative all the time. I think, what was it, the Saturday Night Live sketch about Debbie Downer? It's just like, no matter what everybody's excited about, she finds a reason to say why it's really not. Yeah, but it's not great. And it's that kind of a thing. And so where you can, people like that, their energy can drag you down. And a lot of times what we'll see is we say, well, we're going to clear those toxic people out of our life. We're not going to deal with them. The problem is that when you're out in the world, you're going to be dealing with people of all types. If you're in any kind of service profession, you are going to be dealing with a variety of people. And I've done various kinds of service in my life. I mean, I've done library work, although again, I admittedly was in the type of library work that kind of hid in the back. But I mean, I did work with the public from time to time, and whenever I have worked with the public, I find that you find there's a lot of people who are not well. You find there's a lot of people who are now, whether or not they're diagnosed with something, there's many who are, whether someone has a diagnosis or whether or not they are just, I mean, or it just becomes very clear that something isn't right. When I've worked with students, it's very clear that you have some students who have certain needs. When I think about people who are on the autistic spectrum, and the way, I mean, you have a lot of people who have been put into that category, whether always correctly or not. Nonetheless, you have this idea, or you have the idea of people who are neurodivergent. You hear discussion of that, and you're not talking about people who necessarily relate to the world in the same way. And when, especially if somebody is suffering from something like that, then it's very, or I don't know, maybe suffering is an overstatement. I'm sure if you ask autistic people, they're perfectly fine, but they can become, certain social things may or may not be as easy for them as it might be for somebody who is not considered to be autistic or on that spectrum. And even that's a word. I always use the word autistic kind of advisedly, because it's not like the origins of that word kind of has Nazi origins. So that's why I'm not crazy about that word. I would rather that they picked a different word, but nonetheless, that's the word that they use. And and when you run into people like that, things that you might think are not a big deal might be a big deal to those people, and they might be experiencing a whole rash of emotions. So, point being, when you're out in the world, you're dealing with people of all types. Even if you're just going to the store, you may run into different people, and if your encounter with somebody is going to spoil your entire day, it's kind of you want to have that thing where you have a safe barrier up, but at the same time, you can be open to people and you can be empathetic and maybe, and again, not looking down on people like, oh, look at me, I'm really peaceful and you're not. Like, I mean, not that kind of an energy, just more that whatever people are going through, it's kind of like, it goes back to the whole idea of the isness of things, just letting something be what it is. Without making a judgment about it, without saying, oh, is that person judging me? Oh, is this a person a good person or a bad person? Like, they just are. And whatever they're going through is just what they're going through. So I find for me, when I start experiencing emotions like that, I have to kind of let them just pass through me, because I have to say, okay, well, I mean, and eventually, if I just sit with it, eventually it comes to me like, okay, this is me or this is somebody else. I mean, and again, I can pull cards and so forth, which I'm going to do right now. And by the way, I haven't said hello to the people who have joined. Oh, JRC, you're there too. Hello, good morning. So it's, I feel like I have to, you have to kind of just be able to move through it. And if you're feeling a sadness, like allowing yourself to kind of feel it without saying, nope, I'm not going to feel sad. I'm going to, because then you can sometimes have other people's stuff kind of start, again, just kind of grabbing on and becoming your stuff. It ends up weighting you down on an unconscious level, because repression is never really the best way to deal with it. So let's see what our cards say for today about this topic or any other. Let's see what we have. Okay. Oh, yeah, completely on this topic. Okay. So our first card, which we did have the other day, is comparison. 5 of Swords. Okay, this starts with, yes, there's, you can decide which of these you want to be for this thought experiment here, but whether you're the tree, this kind of tree, or whether you're the bamboo stalk, or whatever, maybe you don't have to fight with either one, but the idea is that these are both plants, but they're both very, very different, right? They're both very different kinds of plants. They have different properties. They grow differently. They both can be used as, like you can make stuff out of both of them, but it's not, but they're very different. And if the tree said that it wasn't a good, there was, well, I'm not a proper tree because I'm not this. Well, that's because you're not that, right? We tend to compare ourselves, and this is the first thing that we do to limit ourselves, is we we look at other people. That's why sometimes Five of Swords is considered to be a card of envy, because you look at other people and you say, oh, that person has that and I don't, if I was more like that person, I'd be successful. Oh, I'm an author. I'm writing books. I've only sold X number. They look at all the copies they sold. I mean, is my book as good as theirs? Like, people do all kinds of things to compare themselves to other people. This whole benchmarking thing that we do, trying to say, when we because there is this element to our society that's competitive, and where people, it's just the way it's one of the things about our culture that is, I guess, like anything, depending on circumstance, maybe sometimes competition is a healthy thing, but there's other times when it's not, especially if it makes you feel like you are small or you are helpless or you can't do something. Now, the inner feeling of which we're unaware here is this is actually the Knight of Pentacles. This is the slowing down card, okay? So we see the little turtle on this one. And really the message of the card is literally that. It's literally, couldn't be clearer, slow down. Slow down. We may be slowing down. When we feel that we have to, keep up with somebody or with something, and we just go and go and go and go and go, and then we find that we're blocked in some way or we can't do things, then again, that tends to be internalized, but what it really is a slowing down that's going on. Astrologically, these have been the last couple of days. They're not bad days astrologically. We have several planets now moving into Gemini. And actually there have been a lot of them in Vedic astrology now. I think I was watching a thing, they're moving now into Gemini. But as we have these planetary shifts that are going on, there's some nice aspects that are occurring, but the basic energy is take it easy energy. It's been energy of just, don't feel the need to accomplish. I feel like there's so many people who are kind of being told, like, chill, like stay in the present, just kind of, and you don't need to be better than somebody else. You don't need to be doing things. And again, sometimes exactly what I was talking about, the way in which we perceive people's reactions, it's more what we assume that they're going to the way that we think that their response is going to be to us. A person may not have any thought about anything you're doing at all, or they maybe don't even have a negative thought about something you're doing. But if you look at somebody and you feel like I said, let's just say they have something, like I said in the beginning, they have something else on their mind and they don't respond to you in the way they expect them to respond, we immediately assume it's a criticism of us. And it's not. I mean, it's kind of like, okay, slow down, chill out, stop and allow yourself to process what's going on, because a lot of times there's been a lot of night energy too. And this is a night, actually. This is one of the slower nights. But I've seen Knight of Wands, Knight of Swords in a lot of readings. I'll be doing some more readings today for next week for Liminal Tarot. But there's this energy of, we kind of jump to conclusions very quickly about things. And a lot of times we do. Our knee-jerk reaction is, oh, they didn't react, or they didn't this, or they kind of went, and so therefore they don't like me, they don't like this, I'm not good enough. We immediately, depending on how we feel or how sensitive we are, if that person's having that kind of a day and maybe they're feeling that way about themselves, if you pick up on it, you may think, oh, that's the way they feel about me, but probably has nothing to do with you, I guess. I think the phrasing was, don't take the world personally, right? It's just a lot of times people are doing things and are acting in a way, even if they act out at you, that are not really about you. They're just about themselves, and you remember you're their mirror, so they're looking, and it's like when they yell at you, they're actually yelling at themselves. You kind of have to remember that you're kind of in this kind of setup. So there's a slowing down. And the external feeling, which you might be aware, okay, here's this dream card again. Now, this is the Six of Cups. So this, again, has to do with the past in a lot of ways. Six of Cups usually has to do with nostalgia, the past, childhood, and the past stuff that may come up. So there may be an awareness here that when we experience these kinds of feelings, that we are connecting to, again, it may trigger past stuff in ourselves. And with the dream card, I feel, when I look at it next to the comparison card, like when I compare the two, right? When I look at the two of them together, what I really see here is this is almost the same kind of an energy. Because this girl and this she's looking at this fantasy couple. They're a phantom couple. They don't exist. But this is like her dream, her fantasy, and she's seeing herself as kind of, oh, I'm by myself and I don't live up to this, right? I don't live up to this. So we can, but again, it's about these projections that we put. And in fact, our card is projections, okay? So this is about saying, be careful of what you might be projecting out, and be careful that you're not absorbing the projections of other people. You want to leave those projections where they are and just say, okay, somebody's going through stuff, but when we have our own center and when we're solid enough, then that person can behave that way towards us. And look, it's not to say that we're not going to get frustrated by things like that. I was thinking about that this week. I said I have my moments where it's really weird because I'll be doing stuff and then there'll be just like one little thing that'll happen and I'll just get really frustrated and I'll be like, all right, that's it. I'm just fine. That's the way you feel. I'm not going to do it. I did that with my podcasts. People got really upset with me because I deleted like the first year's worth of podcasts. I mean, I do have them. I'm working on redoing them, but like cleaning up the tech. But people are going, oh, I don't like the fact that I hear this in your voice, or that, oh, it sounds like, so when you swallow and you kind of do this. I do a lot of that in some of the early, and usually now I would edit all that stuff out. Then I really wasn't proficient in doing that. And so all I hear is people go, oh my God, you're terrible, you're unlistenable. I think the last time I got one last final comment on that, I said, fine, unlistenable, I'm deleting everything. It was kind of like, and then people are like, what did you do that for? But I'm like, it'll come back. But I was just so tired of it. Like, you have that straw that breaks the camel's back, you reach that point, and you're just like, that's it, I'm done. So we all have points like that. And again, I would not suggest that. I think again, that social thing of like, oh no, you shouldn't look at it that way. You shouldn't let people do make you feel that way. They do. It's just that if you can have an awareness of what's happening there, you're still going to probably be annoyed about it, but at least you have the context for working through it, for letting the drama just kind of be what it is, And the ultimate outcome card is our outsider card again. So again, yeah, that's the script that we play that says, again, I don't belong, I'm not good enough. Another 5, okay? 5 of Pentacles, 5 of Swords. So yeah, so it's talking about this energy of us feeling inadequacy, but this inadequacy comes out of the way we're perceiving the environment, where we're letting stuff going on in the environment define who we are, okay? And so, and maybe we are slowing down. Maybe we're at a point where we're like, okay, maybe I need a rest. I need a break. Maybe I've been high intensity. Maybe I've been doing a lot of stuff lately. Maybe I've been very creative. Maybe now I'm just kind of like, all right, now I need a. But when we step back from things, there's judgments about that too. I mean, if you it's like, no, if you're going to be a good, productive member of society, you got to be working all the time. And there's all kinds of ways in which shadow comes up and ways in which we shame ourselves. So this is kind of saying you want to be aware that what's coming in from the past. What are your past influences here? What are your current environmental influences? What are you picking up from the nexus that you're in? Because let's face it, we are in a very high anxiety time, regardless of what your personal beliefs are, or what, how you feel socially, politically, like where you fit into the whole thing. People are very, very, there's a lot of divisiveness right now, and a lot of times that split in the environment can make us feel split too. So there's a need. And this is interesting too, because now what's coming into my head, this message has come through a few times in the channeling that I've done. One of the things that, I've got to put the Azrael sessions up. I want to do kind of an introductory video to that. But the second one that I did, he said something about there are no messiahs. Like, don't look for a messiah. And I feel like that may be the energy of this card too. We may be looking for somebody to come in. And I'm not saying necessarily the people watching this, but there tends to be this thing towards that one person who's going to be our rock or our support, or who's going to save us or take us through a terrible time. And the only person who's going to do that is you. Okay, you're going to do that. The only person who's going to do that is you. Nobody's going to do it for you. So I think it's kind of just saying, if you're somebody who feels that everything is terrible and we need a person to solve this problem, and it doesn't matter who that person is. Okay, I'm not making any conjectures about who that is. No one person, no matter how talented or whatever great skills they have, is going to be able to solve everything. Ultimately, yeah. Now it's kind of like that person's either being scapegoated, or that person is now. It's almost like you've given that person the mantle of kingship, and that's not a good mantle to have either, because either way, or the mantle of the saint. I mean, nobody lives up to any of that stuff. So don't expect that of other people, and don't let other people expect that of you. Okay? I mean, you are who you are, and you're going to do things, and you'll go, through your days, and you may reflect on decisions and say, well, that was a good decision, or that wasn't. And it is. It's just what it is. And sometimes you're going to, it's like anything. Sometimes you're going to make good decisions when you play the game, sometimes you're not. And there's no sense in beating yourself up. You just, whatever's happening in the present, you just deal with what's in front of you. Don't catastrophize about the future. Don't allow, oh, well, this happened in the past, so it's futile, this is going to happen again. It's this, we want to get away from this, but not let all of this stuff. Honestly, the fact that I see that these hands almost look like trees, this almost, to me, is the way, family and society can pull us back. That's almost what I think about, because when I think of the tree symbolism is often, like in Lenormand readings, that the tree is often connected to your family. That's the thing that will tie you back down. Ancestral patterns is what may tie you down. So, So anyway, I hope this reading was helpful. I hope this was the topic that presented itself today. So I hope that this is helpful to you in your day and what you're doing and going on. Yes, I will be here all week. The next time I will not be doing a live stream will be a week from today, next Saturday, because I am finally doing my Rouhani healing class. And that starts like the conference I had the other day. It's in Britain, so it starts at 5 a.m. here. So I'll have to be up extra early to take that class and to work on that. So So anyway, I hope you all have a great rest of your weekend. It's Saturday now, and if you're here in the Northeast, it's going to be getting really. I mean, if you like hot, humid weather, then this is the time for you. I'm not particularly a fan, so I may be feeling a bit like a wet dish rag this week when the lows are about 72 and the highs are like 95. Which, if you're in England watching this, that's like a low of in the low 20s, and your high is going to be closer to 50. So it's not not something that I care for in large doses. Anyway. All of you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.